On behalf of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Administration for Community Living and Indian Health Service, I would like to welcome everyone to the long-term services and supports webinar series. My name is Anna Whiting-Sorrell, and I work for Kaufman and Associates, and I will be your moderator today. Today's webinar is titled Dementia Initiatives and Resources from the International Association for Indigenous Aging. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight some of the main features of the Zoom webinar interface. So slide 2. The presentation slides appear in the main window, while the speaker will appear on the top corner. At the bottom of your screen is a menu bar. Here you will find the chat, raise hand, question and answer, and closed captioning feature. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing, and we will respond to these concerns as they come in. We've got a great team of people to help us do that. Next to the chat box is the raise hand feature. You will be able to use this during the question and answer segment to let us know when you would like us to unmute your mic so you can ask a question. Another way to submit a question is in the question and answer box itself, where you can leave your question at any point in the webinar for the presenters to address during the question and answer segment at the end. Lastly, live captioning is available for today's broadcast. Simply click on the CC icon to use this feature. Please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available online in the near future on cms.gov. With all of that, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. In the next slide, we would like to just to review the disclaimer that this webinar series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenter and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So with that, we'll move to the next, to the objective slides. And I have to kind of regroup a little bit here. And so the objectives are to provide an overview of the National Healthy Brain Initiative, to discuss a project that has been funded by the Department of Justice to provide elders with dementia from wandering, and then a highlight of the dementia program for American Indians and Alaska Natives communities. So with that, we could go to the next slide. And it is my pleasure to introduce the presenters from the International Association for Aging, better known as IA Squared. The first person you can see on screen is Dave Baldridge. He is a native advocate for elder issues. He has served as the executive director of IA Squared since 2003. Prior to that, he was the executive director for the National Indian Council on Aging from 1992 to 2002. Dave has been actively involved in public policy and research efforts on a federal, state, and local level. His accomplishments include leading national advocacy for the Older American Indians Act with services for American Indian elders. He has authored numerous papers on Indian advocacy, health, demographics, and culture. His work has involved extensive relationship building with tribal councils and organization, as well as sovereignty issues. And in his spare time, he would volunteer as a canine handler in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and would deploy on search and rescue missions with his border collie. As a search and rescue volunteer for 9 years, Dave is currently the team's president. I'd also like to introduce Marianne O'Mara, who is a public health program and communication associate with IA Squared. Prior to joining, she completed her master's in public health at the University of Michigan. Her work includes experiences with the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe, an intern combating homelessness, and service trips to Mexico, Honduras, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Ecuador. At the University of Michigan, Marianne served as a research assistant with work focused on the importance of community and culture connectedness as a protective factor and developing derived interventions, culturally derived interventions. She is interested in sustainable solutions that prioritize, include, and support Indigenous knowledge. The final third presenter will be Brianna Dora May, who is a tribal public health and aging associate for IA Squared. She is a Southern California native of the Gabrielino tribe. She now resides in Central Oregon. Brianna attended the University of California, Santa Barbara, majoring in zoology science and minoring in American Indian and Indigenous studies. She has been passionate about education and outreach regarding Indigenous communities and environmental matters. Brianna is actively involved in her tribal community. She works closely with her multi-generational family for federal recognition and has been an anthropological mentor for sacred land protection. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Dave, and I'm just so honored that you're a part of this presentation, Dave, so it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's quite an honor to be able to talk with you all today, and we've been looking forward to it. I'm a 35-year Indian elder advocate, along with my close colleague and our board chair, Bill Benson, and have got a lot of miles under my belt on behalf of Indian elders. I feel that our work has been very, very challenging. IA Squared, we're a small nonprofit, and we think we're kind of a think tank rather than a boots on the ground type of organization. But CDC has named us as part of their BOLD initiative to administer a 5-year grant to deal with Alzheimer's and dementias nationally for Indian country. So we're very, very excited about that. And I'm highly honored and happy that my colleagues are so enthusiastic and competent. Shall we talk about
next slide, please?
Dementia. Okay.
Yeah, let us move to the next slide.
As you can see, reading these, Native people are tremendously affected by health issues, as the Indian Health Service, founded in 1955, has done some marvelous things. It struggles today under the continuing lack of funding. IHS has traditionally been very poorly funded in relation to other federal agencies and has done an exceptional job in dealing with American Indian and Alaska Native health. For example, maternal and infant mortality was reduced by 97% by about 1999. So IHS has been in the picture and is our main backstop. However, as I mentioned, they remain so underfunded and so challenged by COVID, which has overwhelmed, along with the US, has overwhelmed Indian country and Indian tribes. We find not as much in the way of resources and work around dementia that we'd like to see. As we look at dementia, it's a disease, but it's not easily diagnosed. And our experience is that it's often first noticed in a community by the senior program director, the Title VI director, or community health representatives. And it doesn't always present in the same way as most diseases in a medical office. Often, as I mentioned, the first people to notice are the senior service director, the family, the friends, and the CHRs, the community health representatives. So it's been a very difficult issue for Indian country to deal with. And we have a very quickly growing number of educated Indian Native young people who are probably more conversant with health issues, certainly than their parents and grandparents, which would include me. My hopes are very high that Indian country can survive this epidemic of dementia as we've survived other epidemics of various kinds over the years. But it is absolutely a huge, huge challenge for us. Okay.
Thank you, Dave.
Sure. A quote
So
here.
continuing,
I'm sorry.
do you want to go ahead, Dave? You can.
Oh, just here's a quote from Bruce Fink, who has for many years been a close colleague of ours and has headed elder services for the Indian Health Service. And he's been an exceptional partner, as has IHS for us. So I'll pass it along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We really appreciate all that you had to say. So can we go on to the next slide, please? So in a recent project with the CDC Foundation, we focused on respite care. We gave out 1,259 hours of respite care to caregiver grants for 20 American Indian elders who have experienced memory loss. So the objective was to improve physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of American Indian and Alaska Native elders with memory loss, as well as their caregivers who were impacted by COVID. So IA Squared, we partnered with HFC, formerly Hilarity for Charity, to fund 50 hours of in-home respite support. HFC having a pre-established respite program, they assisted us with the process. For individuals to apply and qualify for the respite care award, there was no requirement of a formal dementia diagnosis. This is unlike many memory respite care programs currently. The application and review process was simplified as well for this project, and the eligible caregivers were selected upon completion of the application, and then it went through an internal review. So the respite care that was provided by Home Instead, or it was provided by contracts with a few multi-state network of Native operated home care agencies. What we came to realize is that this was because during the process, many of our recipients were in inaccessible areas that were oftentimes way too remote for the services to reach them. So many of our tribal communities, they also were closed, and non-residents were not welcome in due to COVID. We still, though, were able to help 12 tribes spanning 11 states. Again, referring back to the application process, I want to note that 9 of the 28 recipients did have a dementia diagnosis. 3 were Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, we did have 1 recipient that passed away prior to receiving care from us. That was really hard. Some of the key challenges additionally that we faced included noting that Many people did not resonate or identify with the word caregiver. We learned that many people did not know what respite care was or had never heard of the term. And we learned that in some tribal communities, there is no word for dementia or Alzheimer's. We also learned that there's no streamlined communication process for reaching tribal elder services, public health, and health providers across tribal communities. It was also clear that respite care service providers are difficult to find, especially in rural and reservation areas, and virtually all are extremely short-staffed. We were able to close out this project earlier this year and use these lessons moving forward in our other projects. So it was a really good opportunity for us to bound forward. So can you go to the next slide, please? So as Dave was mentioning earlier, we have a 5-year US Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC funded project that establishes IA Squared as a national hub for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, or ADRD, you might hear us refer to it as, primarily for information resources serving Indian country. So IA Squared provides training, technical assistance, and resources for tribes, tribal leadership, healthcare, and public health staff, urban Indian health centers and organizations, and tribal elder service advocates across the country. And the activities for this project, they're designed to advance community engagement, help build capacity among tribes and tribal members serving organizations, promote healthy cognitive aging strategies across the lifespan, and foster dementia-capable tribal communities. Again, we're very excited to be wrapping up year 2 of this project, and we're gaining ground now heading into year 3. Can you head to the next slide, please? So as part of our CDC A Healthy Brain project, we have an advisory group. So our advisory group helps in our discussions at the strategic level. They help provide feedback on program resources. They serve as an ear to the ground, and as our information resources are created, they help facilitate with the distribution and sharing. So when we asked our advisory group to prioritize the roadmap strategies, strategy number 3, which is about helping people and families who are already facing issues, was the top priority over all of the others. Additionally, for us, one of the highlights that was born out of the advisory group is an adaptation of the National Dementia Friends content specific to American Indian and Alaska Native populations. Dr. Jennifer Carson on our advisory group approached us about their work and put forward the idea, and then facilitated a discussion with US Aging, who was also on our advisory group, and US Aging was very willing to adapt the content, which includes a brief basic overview of risk reduction content, as well as other culturally specific changes recommended in a working group who helped us with the resource adaptation. Can you go to the next slide, please? So another major accomplishment is our updated website. It looks like this here in the image if you visit it. It includes a brain health section and already a robust resource library. So the goal of our resource library is to primarily identify American Indian and Alaska Native specific resources, but also to identify the most potentially useful resources from the larger universe of things that already exist. So on our brain health resource library, you'll also be able to see our recently released and adapted brain health resources that we're going to talk about here in just a second. Can you go to the next slide, please? So our products are designed by and designed for American Indian and Alaska Native communities. IA Squared has taken a diligent effort to involve community members, elders, Title VI, as well as our National Advisory Board into the creation and the development of these products that we produce. So these conversations and the gathering of feedback that allows us to transform the information into visually appealing and meaningful products that are developed proudly by and for the community. So we'll be taking the next few minutes to, like I said, introduce you to a few of the products that we have available. Next slide, please.
Okay. Let me get this back. Okay, so I² has published a new policy report for American Indian and Alaska Native communities and leaders. This brief examines how existing federal and tribal law and state policy actions currently address Alzheimer's disease and related dementia in American Indian and Alaska Native communities. As sovereign nations, tribes are uniquely situated to use the law as a public health tool to promote the health and well-being of their communities. Law, regulation, and policy are all understood to be essential public health services as tools to promote equity and improve public health. Consensus chronic disease success stories cited by experts are rooted in legal changes, such as tobacco control, vaccine policy, and seatbelt use. Against this backdrop, Alzheimer's disease and related dementia and dementia caregiving issues are commonly addressed through law and policy in mainstream communities. You can view and download this report as well as all of our other resources today on our website by visiting the Brain Health Resource Library. And next slide, please. We have also created a flyer with 10 signs of thinking and memory changes that could potentially be signs of dementia, specifically for American Indian and Alaska Native communities. This content was co-created in conjunction with the American Indian and Alaska Native Brain Health Advisory Group based on content and adaptations from the Alzheimer's Association and the University of Wyoming. We offer several designs to target different audiences and are currently offering a printing stipend. And you can reach out to us if you are interested in that printing stipend for this product. Next slide, please.
So we also have revised and updated a 2-page flyer that is about dementia risk reduction intended for American Indian and Alaska Native communities and tribal serving organizations to use. The changes include updating statistics, writing in plain language, updating the designs. It can be distributed through senior centers and intertribal organizations, healthcare facilities, administrative offices, tribal newspapers or radio stations, or as a mailer to tribal members. Next slide, please. So we also are starting to release our planned 6 series of nutritional rat cards. This healthy eating focused messaging series includes practical advice and a culturally relevant recipe. So the rat cards can be distributed through senior centers, intertribal organizations, healthcare facilities, administrative offices, tribal newspapers, radio stations, and as mailers to tribal members. Tribal meal delivery programs can also incorporate weekly distribution for in-person or home delivered meals. And again, high resolution files are available for download. If you haven't noticed, you can also check the chat. I've been pasting the links in there for you to be able to directly access these files on our website. Next slide, please. So in the near future, we are planning to release additional information products, including the ADRD state plan. This is a guide. It's a resource that will aid in ADRD policy and planning for American Indian and Alaska Native tribal communities, leaders, and state and local public health entities. Additionally, we're working on a sample tribal resolution for tribal communities to address ADRD that can be modified to the individual tribal needs, and language can also be modified to what is preferred, whether that be American Indian or Alaska Native or Native Hawaiian. We also are working on a social media toolkit that will be culturally tailored to American Indian and Alaska Native communities. And we are working on an updated dementia risk reduction graphic that can be used as a standalone, but will also be featured in the Dementia Friends for American Indian and Alaska Native Communities workbook. So be sure to stay tuned for those things as well. Next slide, please.
Another one of our initiatives for which we are developing educational resources for is creating a tribal elder safety net to address wandering, funded by the Department of Justice. The purpose of this project is to prevent wandering among tribal elders living with Alzheimer's disease and related forms of dementia, develop a robust wandering search and rescue support strategy in the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe Reservation, and create a replication guide to benefit tribes nationwide. So far, we have created a person profile template to be filled out with elders' information to be added to a database in case they ever go missing or wander. We are continuing to develop resources that will serve tribal elders, especially those living with ADRD, their family caregivers, tribal police and first responders, tribal elder and social services, and members of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. Information can also be found on IA2's website about dementia wandering, a resource library, and in any information about this project and the people that are involved. IA2 is an exclusive grantee that is working with a tribal reservation addressing dementia wandering. Dave, do you have anything that you would like to add about this project at all, or search and rescue? Oh, I think you're on mute, Dave.
Our original source of expertise for this
Oh.
issue came from a professor, I believe, West Virginia, named Robert Coster, who developed an extraordinary approach to finding missing and lost persons designed for search and rescue communities. We learned that one of the key categories for missing lost persons includes, he's got a number of categories, but certainly includes dementia and confusion. And this guide has enabled us to create what we feel is going to be the first boots on the ground program in Indian country to help tribes address it, and families and friends of elders who may be affected. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. And we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so that leads us to Dementia Friends. Dementia Friends is a global movement that aims to change the way people view dementia by educating communities about what dementia is and how it affects people. We can make a difference for people affected by dementia. IA2, in collaboration with Dementia Friendly America, Nevada, adapted specifically for American Indian and Alaska Native individuals and communities. Dementia Friends aids in spreading awareness, reducing stigma, and reducing risk in tribes and urban Indian communities. IA2 and the University of Nevada, Reno DEER program hosts these culturally tailored Dementia Friends information sessions. Once a person has gone through the Dementia Friends information session, then they are able to go through the champions training so they can bring the Dementia Friends information sessions to their own communities. These are all free trainings and include a guide with a full script. Champions can offer sessions as big or as small at any time convenient for them. One of our champions, Valerie Sosi of the Soso Foundation, did hold a Dementia Friends information session for her community that I did attend, and it was pretty awesome and amazing. She was able to go back and forth between the English language and their Navajo language. This is a huge win for our Dementia Friends for American Indian and Alaska Native Communities initiative. Next slide, please. Awesome. So we're going to be showing a video. It's called The River Story, read by our own Dave Baldridge, Executive Director of IA2. Dave successfully lives and works with dementia. So you're welcome to play that video now, please.
For every human being, life is like a river. The constant flow of water represents our daily experiences,
from routine and familiar to those that take us by surprise. If we're lucky enough to live a long life, we'll experience the river in each of the 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. Spring is early childhood, when the river is new to us and we're just learning about all the fish, birds, and animals that connect with it. Summer is our experience from childhood to adulthood, when we transition from relying on others to navigating the water and harvesting for ourselves. Fall is adulthood, when we know the river and its resources and dangers well enough to provide for others, raise children, and chart our own course in the world. Winter is elderhood, when we've acquired the deepest knowledge and wisdom, but also start to experience changes from the aging of our bodies. Dementia is like navigating a river freezing in a long winter storm or even a blizzard. Storms can come in any season, although they're most common and most severe in winter. The wind and snow make it harder to see and hear the water. Everyday life, the natural flow of the water, becomes harder to navigate. Thinking activities that used to be easy, like planning a fishing trip, buying bait, planning meals for the trip, and reaching out to others to join the activity, become increasingly difficult. However, even at the start of a winter storm, emotional experiences and feelings remain strong. For example, the love of fishing, the memory of the sunlight bouncing off the rippling current, and the joy of company. The longer a person lives with dementia, the thicker the ice on the river can become. The everyday flow of experiences beneath the surface is more difficult to reach and navigate without help. Eventually, even deep and lifelong emotional and spiritual connections are harder to access through the thickening ice. This story of a river in a long winter storm helps explain the experience of dementia. Facts, recent memories, and complex thinking become harder to reach in the thickening ice, while deeper memories and emotions continue to flow under the surface.
So this story and video are included in our Dementia Friends sessions, and I feel like it does a wonderful job of portraying dementia. So the river story applies a Native American cultural analogy to the topic of dementia. This updated version of the river story has been created for Dementia Friends. The river story was originally written and narrated by Dr. Anton Truer. Dave, did you have anything that you wanted to add about the river story? I think you're muted still.
Yeah, thank you. For all of us, whether or not we have dementia or are a caregiver or a friend, it's a very personal and deeply, deeply involving story that affects almost every aspect of our lives. So I'm just really grateful to be part of our team and be able to help tell the story a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. We can go to the next slide, please. I² has been also awarded an 8-month grant from the CDC Foundation, which is working in partnership with the CDC's National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases. The program supports community-based organization efforts to increase adult flu and COVID-19 vaccinations and reduce vaccine hesitancy across racial and ethnic populations currently experiencing disparities. With this funding, I² joins the CDC's PAVE partner network of more than 540 health departments, federally qualified and community health centers, and nonprofits working to improve equity in adult immunizations. In addition to new flu and COVID-19 vaccine campaign materials that will be made available Nationally, IA² will provide target outreach assistance to help support overburdened tribal staff in a partnership building and outreach. The overall objectives of the PAVE project include increasing the range of trusted elder community voices, support vaccine education and delivery, availability of community and Native specific messages, number of local vaccine opportunities, and a number and range of partnerships and collaborative activities between providers and tribal organizations. We can go to the next slide, please.
So IA² is also working as a third-party evaluator to help tell the stories, improve programs, and sustain funding. IA² offers leadership and practical assistance in program evaluation and research, often in complex environments and in a wide variety of areas, from education to business and industry to nonprofit and government agencies, including knowledge of ADRD's impact in Indian country, as well as national and tribal efforts to address solutions. We also have experience developing programs, evaluations for an array of funders, including, or an example would be the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services or the Department of Justice. Also experience with data collection and analysis to improve program performance in Indian country, and a demonstrated expertise in delivering evaluation services for large-scale products. Additionally, we are starting to work on developing out an evaluation resource library that you'll also be able to find on our website soon. And that will include best practices and case studies. Next slide, please. Again, I want to encourage you all to visit ia².org. You can download our resources. There's a lot to learn on there. You can view upcoming events and so much more. Also, you can scan the QR code if that's easier. Next slide, please. I also want to make sure you guys subscribe to the IA² newsletter for updates about events, various information resources that we have coming out, toolkits. It includes promising practices, community voices blogs, evaluation resources, research. We share all kinds of really great information. Again, you can now scan this QR code on your phone, and this will bring you right to the page to be able to subscribe to our newsletter. Next slide, please. We want to thank you all so much for attending the session. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Our information is there, or you can reach out to us over our website and we'll be able to respond to that correspondence as well. Next slide, please.
Right, so I think it comes back to me as the moderator. I want to thank you three, Dave, Marianne, and Brianna, for the wonderful, wonderful information. I hope everybody has looked into the chat to see all of the links that you have put in there. We have one question in the question and answer chat box, and they would like someone to explain some resources that are available for urban Indians.
Well, I would say that any of our resources that we discussed today are available. As we noted throughout the presentation, pretty much all of our resources, you can reach out to us, and we have various design options that have been adapted and are available. We also have made it possible for organizations to place their logo onto our material to provide like that partnership experience. Again, that's just a matter of reaching out to us and we can help with any of that. And as we mentioned, we have some printing opportunities available. So if printing is a problem and you need printing for your organization, some of these resources, just again, reach out to us and we can see how we can help you with that. Hopefully that helps.
That was very good. Thank you, Mary Ann. And I just would like to remind everybody that that at the bottom of your screen is the QA box if you want to type in a question. And then we'll move to if maybe someone wants to be unmuted and ask a verbal question. We do have one more question in the QA box. Is there any research on caregivers? And also a follow-up end of life for those with dementia?
Oh, I would have to answer that there probably is a lot of research available about caregivers. For us, when we started our project with the CDC Foundation, specifically focusing on caregivers, it was hard for us to find information specifically targeted or outlined for Native communities that were caregiver based. But what we realized is that caregiving is so integrated into the family system. And so we started framing the way that we viewed caregiving a little bit differently. And so we kind of changed our method of how we were researching caregiving from a traditional, what we call caregiver view to more of a, multi-generational family experience. So I'm not sure if I can provide you specifically with like links at the moment of what that would look like, but that was kind of our method of how we went about that.
And I heard you offer a variety of resources on your website, and you can ask specific questions. So if someone would like to add that question and engage with you all later, that would also be acceptable.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Great. So another question is, are there resources to facilitate discussions of respite care within families where there is disagreement on the need for respite care?
Oh, that's very interesting. To be honest, I'm not aware, but it would be a very interesting thing to look into to gain some more insight into that topic. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
I heard you say that respite care was something very new in Indian country when you guys began this project. So research into that would be important, and look forward to the resources you're building around it, especially when there's disagreement in families. So having those conversations.
And one of the things absolutely. The conversations and talking about that is very important. And one of the things I'll note again that we realized during our time working on the respite project was that a lot of people didn't know what the term respite meant. And so we were almost going back to a ground zero of like, what is respite? Who qualifies for respite? What does it mean to have respite? Or even as much as people feeling guilty for taking the respite. And it was kind of us, explaining and giving that background of the importance of, self-care for the caregiver as well.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as questions, very interesting.
Yeah, it's always good to hear feedback from communities that we know they have different perspectives. So we have another question. Someone would like to know how to contact to get this training. This individual has 35 caregivers that it would be great to get this training for.
Yeah, do you want to go back to the slide with our contact information on it, on one before this?
Oh, thank you, Tom, for doing that. That's great. That would be really helpful.
Whoever asked that question, feel free to reach out to Bree or myself, and we'll be sure to get in contact with you.
All right. Thank you. And then another question about just sharing some information that there are 2 studies from the family group conference model with Native families struggling with concerns about elders. One of them is out of the University of Iowa and the other, the University of Washington. And if you would like, maybe this individual could send those studies, the citations to me, and I'll make sure you get them.
That would be great. That would be amazing. We'd like to see that for sure.
Absolutely. All right, so there are no open questions in the question and answer. The question in the chat box has been answered. I don't know if there's anybody that would like to be unmuted and ask a verbal question. Tom and Christina, is there anybody raising their hand? I don't see anything.
No, I don't see anybody on the list.
All right. Well, with that, I would just like to end today's meeting by sharing my extreme pleasure in getting to know Dave and Marianne and Brianna and this excellent, excellent resource for Indigenous communities across the country. There's so much really good information that you shared, and I know I will be looking at your website, IA Squared. I wanted to say that again because we want to be sure that people go to that website and look at these wonderful, wonderful resources that are so needed in our country, in our Indian country. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded, and the audio and presentation slides will be made available online at cms.gov. And finally, I would just like to thank everybody for joining today's webinar. I wish you good tidings as we move through these next few days and weeks, and hope you will join us at our next session. And with that, we're concluded. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.